I have friends that are pretty overweight and one that died pretty recently who was really big. And he just had this feeling when he would meet people. He talked about it a little bit. He was just obese. It was just this thing.
So I want to talk about this podcast. Peter Attia was Joe Rogan's guest about 6 years ago. And there were a lot of people that said they lost a lot of weight after they watched this podcast. I think that some of the things are right, some of the things are wrong. So who am I anyway? I have coached over 80,000 men. I'm not a physician. I'm not a doctor. I'm a health researcher and a sex researcher. I do a lot of experiments. I have a lot of people I call Matt's guinea pigs who do experiments. So what I'm going to tell you is based on what my research and my research team has revealed about why you can't lose fat and a way of losing fat. And I'm going to show it to you. And it's shocking because it involves sugar. Okay. It involves sugar. There's always ultimately going to be two ways of getting energy for your body. There's either fat or carbs. That's it. You can't really get energy except with fat and carbs. There's protein, but you can't get much energy from proteins. It's really going to be fat or carbs. The big misleading thing everybody thinks is that if you just burn your fat in your body, you'll get thin. That's what everybody thinks. Turn your body into a fat burning machine. But as Peter Attia says in this interview with Joe Rogan, it's not really the full story at all. It's not even part of the story. And I'm going to explain some things that, I think people miss. And I'm a great admirer of Peter Attia and Joe Rogan, but I think people miss this. So here's what I'm going to say in a nutshell. If you want to process fat in order to use it as fuel, then you need to have working mitochondria. Your mitochondria are required to process fat as fuel. Okay. This is a thing that is called beta oxidation. And it's a very complex process involving, all kinds of things. The carnitine shuttle and a huge process, but the mitochondria are the little energy factories in the cell. And if they're sick, you're not going to be able to burn fat. That's surprising to people. So how do you know your mitochondria are sick and you can't burn fat? There's all kinds of people with mitochondria damage. In fact, pretty much if you're overweight severely, if you have any kind of things like type 2 or cancer, anything like that, then you probably have damaged mitochondria, very damaged mitochondria. And if your mitochondria are damaged, you can't burn fat. Burning fat is a very complex process that requires working mitochondria. If you can't burn fat, you have to burn sugar or carbohydrates. That's the only thing. And all carbohydrates ultimately turn into sugar. And the problem with that is that the process of burning sugar for fuel, if your mitochondria are all messed up, is going to be a very low-level, inefficient process called glycolysis. Inefficient, very inefficient. We have glycolysis. It's also been called fermentation in common with every beast, every animal, every mold, anything, even a mushroom, basically has glycolysis. It's like the most ancient form of energy production. It's very inefficient, very much doesn't produce much carbon dioxide, and it produces a lot of lactic acid, a lot of lactate, which in people with mitochondrial dysfunction, if you got a blood test, you'd have high lactate. That's one of the core symptoms of shows mitochondrial dysfunction or busted mitochondria. If you're going to try to burn fat, okay, you're not going to be able to burn fat because your mitochondria are messed up. That's why you go keto, you go low carb, high fat diet. You think I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to burn fat. You can't burn fat without working mitochondria. They need to have these steps, these very complex steps called beta oxidation have to work for you to get energy from fat. Otherwise, you have to get energy from sugar, from carbs, from glucose. Okay? That's the core thing that nobody is telling you. That's why you can't lose fat, because your mitochondria might just be messed up. And they don't really test much for this, but there are blood tests. And what they find is that mitochondria break up, they die, and they end up as debris in the bloodstream. And that mitochondrial debris is actually a big problem. You don't want to have mitochondrial dysfunction because if you look at mitochondrial dysfunction, bloodstream, remnants, debris, guess what? You're going to find that is a signal to the body. It's a signal. It's a bad signal. Your body doesn't want to see pieces of mitochondria in your bloodstream. And if you even look at this optic nerve disease, you could go on and on. I would say in almost every chronic disease, your mitochondria are busted. So you're not going to be able to burn sugar. So what can you burn? You can only burn carbs, really. You can be eating a high-fat diet thinking you're going to burn fat, and really what you're doing is you're packing fat on your body because it just becomes body fat because you can't burn it. You have to have a working mitochondria, working cells to burn fat. And if you're not in good shape with your mitochondria, then you can only burn sugar. Here's what I have found works for people very well to lose fat. It's going to shock you. Cut back all the fat, eat very little fat, and eat almost all sugar. There's two basic types of sugar, fructose and glucose, basically. And fructose can be a problem. Fructose can be a problem. It can turn easily into liver fat. It can be easily turned into body fat. You need some fructose, but not all that much. The best source of sugar as you're trying to reactivate the mitochondria is glucose. I started taking glucose every day, 4 or 5 times, 6 times a day. Now I'm up to 60 grams of glucose. I'm just using plain old glucose. You get a big bucket of it very inexpensively. And I'm working on it because I have some problems with headaches. I'm trying to fix headaches. So I'll probably be on this high glucose diet for 5 or 6 months. Because I'm taking a lot of glucose, that glucose goes right into my body through my gut. It's digested very early in the digestive system. So it doesn't feed bacteria and endotoxins in the gut because it goes right into the bloodstream. You can digest about 1 gram of glucose per minute. So if I take 60 grams of glucose, within an hour, it's going to be all in my bloodstream and it's going to reach my brain. It's going to reach my organs. And that is what I suggest for people with mitochondrial dysfunction, people who have obesity and all other ailments. Now, people are going to say, Matt, everyone knows sugar's bad for you. They don't know that. It's bro science. It's not true. Completely not true. It's the only energy source that you can really use. Years ago, there was a very groundbreaking physician named Walter Kempner. Walter Kempner was brilliant, and he put people with at death's door, people that were almost dead. He put them on a diet consisting of 100% rice diet. And he found that their blood pressure went down, their eyes got better, their diabetes disappeared, their weight normalized. He found that you did have to limit calories somewhat. You couldn't just have any amount of rice, but keeping it around 2,200 kilocalories a day, pretty much people would lose fat and they would then end up going home. He had them stay in a special place for a chef just to cook them rice, make sure they didn't deviate from their diet. Those were the days, right? And Dr. Kempner's thing went 20,000 people, and most of them did extremely well. Rice is basically a source of glucose. Your body turns rice into maltose, into glucose. But if you just take straight glucose, I don't think you need to follow all the issues with the rice diet. It's very hard to follow the rice diet. Basically, what I am doing is I'm eating some protein, and I'm having the glucose. So I use a lot of dairy for my protein. I use milk and cheese. Cheese has a lot of fat in it. I don't use a lot of cheese. I use some, but I use a lot of 1% milk. If you don't want to use dairy, that's fine. You can eat meat with some fat in it, not incredibly fatty, but a little fat. And you can have all of your calories from glucose. And you will be feeding your cells the glucose they can use immediately without any transformation, without working mitochondria. And then your body can start to recover and your mitochondria can start to work. And that's what I'm doing. If you're interested in doing that, I would head over to Daily Medical Discoveries. I'll give away I have a book for you, an ebook, which is really cool. I run the largest alternative health online university for men, memberaccess.com. And that's where I get all my information. I do a lot of research. I have a research team and I do constant experiments. And so if you're interested in doing this experiment, try it out. If you're very sick, you might want to run it by your doctor. Of course, your doctor will tell you sugar's bad for you. You never want to have a lot of sugar. It'll make you diabetic and all of that. I don't think it does. I don't think sugar causes diabetes at all. Just because you have high blood sugar with diabetes doesn't mean sugar causes diabetes. But I always like to compare it to when I was a kid and I went by a house and there was a fire in the house. There'd be firefighters spraying their hoses outside. So I might have thought that firemen cause fires because I always saw firemen when there was a house fire. You might have high blood sugar, but it doesn't mean blood sugar causes diabetes any more than firemen cause fires. You see what I mean? It's a symptom, actually. And if you give your body lots of sugar in the form of glucose mostly, and you cut out most of the fat, your body will start burning the glucose, regenerating the mitochondria. And there's a lot of evidence. A lot of people have said that this has been very helpful for them. It gets their hormones back into whack. It's best for anxiety, depression, all sorts of things that involve our mental health. Anyway, if you'd care to try it, Let me know how it goes. Meanwhile, please subscribe. I'll see you tomorrow.